to my channel. Okay, let's get into this one right here. Yeah, we just did a video a minute ago. If you want to check it out, it's about Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Does your vote really count according to the law? And we won't get too deep into that video. Um, I thought we just do a couple videos on a couple things, since the somebody's going to take office, or somebody's going to stay in office. Well, no, somebody's going to take office next week or in the coming days. So I just I was trying to find out, how did black people, the Democrats and black people, the Democratic Party was basically since the 1960s, because we all know black people were Republicans before that, and then they switched them over to Democrats. Um, and most people know this by Democrats by way of free programs, right? And giving black people free stuff like welfare and food stamps, all this type of stuff. Before that, black people were Republicans, they were conservatives, they were blue collar Americans, they were business owners, and they were hard workers, right? Their music was blues, jazz, soul, and R&B. That's what so-called black people were when they were Republicans. Since they have been Democrats, I'm just trying to figure out, how did the Democrat Party, the party of, I won't just say black people, but it kind of seemed like it was, mostly minorities and blue collar people. Some white people voted for Democrat once the party switched over, because they gave the illusion they were for blue collar workers. And now we know who the blue collar workers are now. They're not Americans, which kind of, you scratch your head. How could any real, black American or white American vote for this party when they're using blue collar workers, when they're for mostly illegal immigrants coming in and being like the 95% of the blue collar workers, thus flushing out white Americans and black Americans out of the blue collar industry. And most of this is illegally. I'm not going to try to say all immigrants that are working in the blue collar industry are illegal, because that's not the case, but still, they still flush out foundational white Americans and black Americans out of those industries, not because these immigrants are better workers, is because they're working for basically cheap or basically nothing when you're looking at the illegal immigrants who are really working, controlling this industry when they're working for nothing. Not only that, how this party has turned into an immigrant party. Well, a party for immigrants, illegal immigrants, the homosexual community, and for companies and corporations. So basically, the Democrat Party is not here for foundational Americans. As much as they want to say they are, there's no proof of this. There's no proof of, how can they talk about a middle class when you're flushing out the middle class? The blue collar basically used to be the lower middle class, right? So basically, they're here for the gay community, the immigrant community, and the companies and corporations that fund the Democratic Party, that hire these immigrants to build up these corporations and make these corporations rich. So you got to ask yourself, where do black people really stand in this whole thing? I'm confused. What party are you really? Now the Republican Party is a weird party, because they come off as, I wouldn't say racist, maybe traditionally, yes, racist. But over the years, they don't seem too racist to me. They seem to be more about foundational America, more about American rights, more about fair labor, more about being proud Americans, about the actual people who lived in this country for centuries. And I wouldn't think this would exclude black people as being proud Americans, even though the whole thing is weird with black people. They kind of, don't represent America and don't act like proud Americans. But the people that's coming over here, you couldn't go to their country and tell them not to be proud Brazilians, proud Puerto Ricans, proud Filipinos, proud this, proud Hawaiians, proud Jamaicans, proud Haitians. Only so-called black Americans are the only people who don't wave their flag, who really don't represent their country. Therefore, they think they're part of the immigrant class that just got here yesterday, last year, or 5 years ago. That's that's the most ridiculous thing you ever heard of. And if I'm coming over here as an immigrant, I'm looking at this like, what? How are you voting for me to jump over you? That makes no sense. It because when I come over here, what I see is me living better than you. And why? Doesn't make any sense. If you've been in this country for hundreds of years, how am I living better than you? And I just got here. Why isn't the party that you're voting for that's helping me out, how come they're not helping you out? And why are they funding me to come jump over you? Now, like I said before, black people, before the Democratic Party, before they turned in the 60s and went to they were Republicans, proud Americans, business owners, and blue-collar workers. Wow, that has changed. That has changed. Now, am I saying that if you go vote Republican, that's going to change your fate? No, I don't think that will. But what they're trying to do is these parties, it seems like they're working against you. The Republicans are saying we're the racist party, so you had no choice but to vote Democrat. But you vote Democrat and it favors and benefits everybody else. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, somebody that doesn't understand logic, you know, I don't want to say that word, the R word, but you keep touching that stove and keep getting burnt. You keep touching that stove and you're getting burnt. And you keep touching that stove and you keep getting burnt. Or you're in an abusive relationship and you don't want to get out. As soon as you want to get out, the abusive spouse says, hey, I'm sorry, I love you, I don't know what was wrong with me. Then you take that person back. And then it happens for another 4 years. And right when you're about to leave out the door, sorry, baby, I don't know what got into me. You're so beautiful. I won't cuss at you. I won't cheat on you again. I won't verbally abuse you. Take them back. And this has been going on. What is that? What would you say? 60 years? Wow. With the Democratic Party. So in essence, black people really don't have a party. They don't. They don't have a party. And it's funny to me because I'm not that old. I'm not like a senior citizen or nothing like that. But the gentrification of black America is just something that I never thought I would see, especially in these small towns. Once it started getting like crazy in the big cities, it was just like, wow. Because every big city you used to go to, in forever, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it was majority black. Like 70% black, 75% black. Now you go to these big cities, it might be 15% black now. And now when you go to the small towns, it's getting that way too. When you can see people in these small towns coming and starting up grocery stores, tire shops, cell phone companies, gas stations, it's over then because it was never in the small towns. It was only hitting the big cities. And that's not even talked about. Like gentrification is, you know what gentrification is? It means you don't exist no more. You're getting wiped out. And they don't talk about this on TV. They don't say nothing. I lived in Harlem before, and to go back one day, I think I was gone for like almost 10 years, and to go back and see Harlem, white people walking the street at 2 o'clock in the morning, it was just white people there, period. It was just like mind blowing. Don't even I grew up in Chicago too. Don't even recognize it. I thought Chicago when I was young, it was so crazy. I don't even remember seeing white people for like weeks. It was crazy. It was that black, and not just in the cities, even in the suburbs. Now you don't even recognize Chicago no more. And it's like that everywhere. Just like in LA. Remember LA in the 70s, it was 75% black. Today, 75% Spanish. My question is, what are these Democrats really bringing you besides getting wiped out in gentrification? In every recession, all the inflation, who gets hurt the most? Well, it's the black community. And when we talk about the United States, when the United States go into inflation, it goes into recession. Everybody else on the Western Hemisphere does too, because everything, the United States is the superpower of the Western Hemisphere. So if we go down, our economy goes down, all these other countries' economy go down too. Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Jamaica, Haiti. I mean, like Haiti can go down anymore, but what I'm saying, their economy goes down even more. So they're going to keep running over here even more. So basically, what we have is, and you already see it, the United States, they're pretty much going to empty out those countries and bring them over here. So there's not going to be room for certain people. And guess who that is? I think we don't have to talk about it. I was a Democrat at one time. I thought that's just what, blue collar workers were. Democrats. Whether you was, you know, most, whether you was white or you were black, especially in the North, um, somewhat in the South, after the switch over, most blue collar workers, blacks and whites, they kind of trended towards the Democratic Party because they were for blue collar workers, blue collar working Americans. What happened? They didn't stop the factories from shutting down. They didn't stop the unions from closing up. What happened? I thought these people were the politicians. No, they sent them jobs overseas. They brought people in to replace Americans. Just saying. And, for the poor whites, they voted Republican for so long. And remember, we always knew the Republicans, they weren't so Americans as we thought, right? When we go back and look at it, more for the rich. So white people also, for a long time, voted based on race, based on who they thought they were supposed to vote for, because the Republicans said they were more American. Well, they weren't. They were always mainly for the rich. So a lot of poor whites were just voting against themselves. They were voting based on race. So to me, as a foundational American, both of these parties really failed foundational Americans. And to me, when you look at the whole thing, they've always had foundational white Americans and foundational black Americans, Negroes, what you call black Negroes, and African Americans. Remember, if you call yourself African American or Negro, you don't know who you are. Remember, the people from Haiti, Jamaica, Barbados, these countries, they don't call themselves that. Call themselves Jamaicans. They know who they are. Only lost people call themselves those names. They call you Americans because you're American. Even white people, you call yourself white, you're not. You're not calling yourself American. You're American. Just because somebody said, "Oh, you came from Africa," okay, they don't call themselves African Jamaicans or African Haitians. or African what are they, Barbadians. I don't know how to say that word. Or African Bahamians. They don't say this stuff. Or what about all they call those people down there in Brazil, the so-called black Brazilians? They call them African Brazilians? No, they call themselves Brazilians. So I just thought this was funny because the Democrat Party is really out of control. They have, I don't know what their values are anymore as far as, you know, foundational Americans, whether white or black, or Americans, period. Whether whatever your race is. Because I'm not going to exclude people because they're not black or they're not white. A lot of people born in this country who, you know, are of Spanish, Indian, Arabian, whatever, and they're Americans. But they know who they are. Or, you know, from Zimbabwe or Libya or Liberia. But they know who they are. They don't call themselves African. Call themselves Liberian. They call themselves these names. They're a proud people. I'm not disrespecting anybody from the Caribbean, but I'm talking about foundational people. I'm talking about when I trace my people back all the way to the 1600s in this country. On one side, the other side, the 1700s. We don't come from slavery. By the time you do your genealogy and start watching Roots and stop believing people on TV or the what do you call it, or the school board. Because remember, they wasn't really teaching black people they was from Africa until like the start in the 70s. Why would you teach somebody they was from Africa in this big African movement if you was just from Africa? How would you have to teach that if that's what you were? But you don't teach African language. How come nobody was speaking, black Americans weren't speaking any African dialect? If they was bringing Africans here all the way until slavery was over. All these Africans were free. They say they got free during slavery. Where was the whole African culture? You don't have to teach this if that's what you are, right? Doesn't make any sense. You was taught, you was whipped, chained, and beat, enslaved, and okay, if that's what happened, nobody would ever forget. Why would you have to teach that through movies? Why would you have to teach that in school if that's what happened? It doesn't make any sense. And then they got all these other cultures in this country to represent their culture. But where's all the African culture in the from the African American community? Restaurants and bookstores and, you know, the second language should be African, right? It shouldn't be Spanish. Why is it Spanish? Why is it Spanish? I'm trying to figure these things out. So I found this kind of funny right here. When you go back and look at the civil rights, in the Civil Rights Act, let me see. Civil Rights Act of 1868. Nicknames. Indian Civil Rights Act, Indian Bill of Rights, Fair Housing Act, Housing Rights Act, Open Housing Act, Anti-Riot Act, what's it say? Federal Anti-Riot Act, Rap Brown Act, Rap Brown Law, Civil Obedience Act, Stokely something Act. But all these are the nicknames for the Civil Rights Act. What struck me, it says Indian Act. What do you mean Indian Act? Indian Bill of Rights. This has to do with the Civil Rights Act? Huh. And then when you go into it, it says Indian Civil Rights Act of 1968 with the law of the Indian Civil Rights Act, ICRA, at the time also called the Indian Bill of Rights. The indigenous people were granted many civil rights that they have been fighting for. The ICRA supports the following: the rights of free speech, press and assembly, protection from unreasonable invasion of homes, rights of criminal defendant to speedy trial, to be advised of charges and to confront any adverse witness, right to hire an attorney in a case, protection against incrimination, protection against cruel and unusual punishment, excessive bail, incarceration of more than 1 year or a fine in excess of $5,000 in any offense, protection from double jeopardy, or ex post facto laws, rights to a jury trial for offenses punishable by imprisonment, equal law protection due to process. Other civil rights, such as sovereignty, hunting, and fishing, and voting, are still issues facing Native people today. So I'm not understanding this. They're trying to tell me all the stuff that black people put rights on the table for with Martin Luther King were called Indian civil rights. I don't understand. And they called it the Civil Rights Act of 1968. They call these people Indian. I always found it funny that, a lot of black people, a lot of white people too, but a lot of black people say they got Indian in their family. You always hear this stuff. You say, oh, yeah, my grandma had Indian hair. My great grandmama had Indian hair. Well, what is Indian hair? So they had, if we say Native Americans, the Asian people, the Mongoloids are the Indians of America. So black people are saying they had Asian hair because that's what they are. You can't say they're somebody else. Native Americans came from Siberia. They're not indigenous to America. They're indigenous to Siberia, right? That's the story. That's the story, right? And they're Mongoloid people. They're Asian. So black people are saying that their grandmothers or their mama, whatever the way they say it, had Asian hair. What is that? It's weird. It's weird that somebody would say it. I mean, when you break it down. So Asian hair is the good hair that black people was referring to as good hair. Huh? And when black people say, I got Indian in my family, so you saying you got Mongoloid people in your family? I'm just trying to understand that. So who is Mongoloid in your family? Your great grandmother, your grandmother, your great grandmother, your grandfather, your great grand. They're Mongoloids. They're Asians. And I can tell you what, if you're mixed with Mongoloid, that's a whole different phenotype. That's not coming out of you just like that. You're going to look Asian even if you mix. Same thing with white people. When they say they got Native American in their family. So you got people in your family who were Mongoloid? Who? Your grandmother? Your great grandmother? Your grandfather? Your great. And this story is the same. With even Spanish people say this, right? They say, we got Indian. We're half Indian. So you got Mongoloid people in your family? And then the tradition, right? When you have Caribbean people, you have Spanish people, you have West Indian people, you even have the black people in New Orleans that celebrate an Indian tradition. These are the people who say, or the black people and the Spanish people who say they're part Indian, but they say they're African. And what's so funny about this, what is it called? The Carnival. If I'm not mistaken, most of this stuff is about a lot of about like independence, right? When they got their independence, they start celebrating in Indian garb. And they start having these fiestas and all this stuff. And I know they've tried to change the story now about the whole thing. And they try to say this is African. And these people are dressed up in feathers and Indian attire and all this stuff. So you're celebrating Indian culture, but not African? Well, how come you're not celebrating African culture? Why would you celebrate Native American culture? Doesn't make any sense. And all these people in the Caribbean and South America, they say they're Indian. So you're saying you're Asian? So you're mixed with Asian, African, Spanish, and some kind of white. It's weird. I guess you could say, I just don't see where's all the Asian in these people that say they're Indian. Doesn't make any sense. Because I've seen people who say they're mixed with Asian. They look Asian. Just like when they say, this is a whole big thing too. They say, a lot of black people say, if you say, well, they will say, what would they say? They say something about, why they don't look African no more. A lot of African Americans, you would think that the whole African American population, a lot of it would still be looking like the people in Africa, right? They brought hundreds of millions of slaves over here. Where's the big African? Where's all the people look African, as far as black Americans? And what they'll tell you is, they'll say, well, because this is what they're taught. You don't look African no more because of the white man. Raped the African women. So you're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of African women having that done to them. So wouldn't the African American population or black American population look like Latin America? What? I'm not understanding this. Wouldn't they look like Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Brazilians? I'm not understanding this. In the slave master, he would have to rape a lot of African women for that to happen. So you're trying to tell me that he might have had some children by the African woman. What about all the children that the African men had with the African women still? It's a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense right here. But, when you make people think, what happens? They get frustrated. They start cussing. Man, you ain't no doctor. You don't have a degree. You ain't no scholar. Well, schools don't make you smart. They make you dumb. They don't make you think. They only make you obey what they want you to read, and they make you take a test after that. They don't teach you common sense. Common sense isn't taught in school. They say Einstein was one of the most brilliant dudes of all times, but this guy had no common sense. So yeah, that's just what because I didn't see any Native Americans or Siberian Native Americans protesting by the thousands in the South with Martin Luther King. So I wonder why it was called an Indian Act. And everything that had to do with the Indian Act had to do with civil rights. The Indian Bill of Rights, all that stuff had to do with the Martin Luther King, what he wanted to pass for black people. That was the Indian Act. And it's just funny to me, most black people back then, they said they had Indian in their family. Cherokee, Choctaw. And if you read some of the records, they said that Indians assimilated into society in the 1900s. And they had communities, just regular communities in every city, every town, all through the United States. Not reservations out in the West. I'll bring you that information too. Said they assimilate under when Jackson was president, assimilated into society and became lawyers, became congressmen, went to schools, had communities. I don't remember these people in my community. Just saying. But yeah, let's get back on this right here. I'm just, you just can't keep touching that stove. You're getting burnt. You're voting for people who are getting paid by corporations to pass laws for the corporations. That's all I'm saying. You can keep voting for these people. You don't see no black people in office yet. President, vice president, you can call them black. You can call them whatever you want to call them. They don't look like your mama. They don't look like your daddy. Obama don't look like your daddy. Kamala Harris don't look like your mama. They can act a certain way. We all know from any common sense from genealogy that Obama's Indonesian. But even if this guy was Indonesian and they knew it, black people would still call him black. But these people who are mixed, they will call themselves, let's say Kamala Harris. She will call herself black and Indian if she is even black, because it's coming to. You watch Candace Owens show doing her genealogy. It's coming out that she's Irish and Indian, and then she's got Jewish in her too. Speaking of Jewish, I saw Farrakhan the other day. All that stuff he talked about Jews and white people for all those years, and to come to find out, his father is a white Jew. You don't believe me? Go look it up. He finally had to come out and say it. He knew it. Come on. He knew it. Becky with the good hair, yellow skin. I mean, his mama is black, but I'm just saying. Saying all that stuff he said about white people and Jewish people, and to come to find out. Well, let's go with what they go for, right? They say you are what your father is, right? So he's a white Jew. They say you are what your father is. So if Kamala Harris' father is white, that means Kamala Harris' father is white, which means Kamala Harris is white Irish. Huh? Ain't that the stuff that black people stand on every day through this so-called African, this African, what do you call it? Patriarchal thing. You are what your father is. So Miss Harris is white. What's his name? I heard Stephen A. Smith got a white father too, so I guess he's white. Farrakhan, he's white. His father's a white Jew. Y'all got to make up your mind. Y'all, black people say all these people that are mixed are black because their father is black. So there you have it. You got to go with the patriarchal thing, right? They've been telling black people this for so long. It's just ridiculous. You are, in reality, what both of your parents are. That's what you are. Only in America, they go with this nonsense that you are what your father is. It's ridiculous. Well, in Indian society, you was what your mother was. That's what it really was. If you go by what they went by. I don't tend to agree with that. I agree with you are what both your parents are. So if you're mixed, you're mixed. How about Kanye West? I think his great grandmother's white. Yeah, from Switzerland. So I guess he's, what is he? How about 50 Cent? His grandmother's white. I was blown away by that. Look it up. You don't believe me? Go on the internet. It says 50 Cent's grandmother white. You don't believe that? Go look it up in the genealogy. His grandmother's white. Oh, maybe a good reason why he loves Eminem. Maybe not. Maybe because Eminem put him on. I'm not sure. But the whole black and white thing is ridiculous. The black versus white. People are just people. These are the governments using this stuff on people to divide and conquer. And you saw what happened for black Americans and white Americans while they were fighting. Other people came in, swooped under their feet, and took over. While you was fighting for Democrat and Republican, you're getting wiped out. Yeah, so all these people are a joke. Republicans and Democrats. They ain't for the people. Tell me what you think.